Thanks for coming to Core Dev Webinar 12. We're going to be going over the new task template, and we're going to be going over tips and tricks and basically how to get started writing a task. So where should you go first? Probably Koii.network. That's our main URL, and you can find some interesting links here. So I'm just going to middle mouse click, learn EZ Sandbox, docs, and I'm going to look at Koii Ocean too. Maybe I want to look at the blog. That's probably something that might be worthwhile showing you guys. So in reverse order, let's look at the blog first, just because we'll probably spend the least amount of time here. But I did want to let people know we do have this blog. Usually you can find most of our up-to-date information on what's going on or exactly how Koii works or our opinions on things. You can find that all here. So it's really cool. I mean, if you want to right down here, learn about KPL tokens. If you don't know what KPL tokens are, those are Koii programming library tokens. Basically, if you want to make your own token on Koii, it takes like 5 minutes. And if you have your own token elsewhere and you want to bridge it over to Koii, it's a little more time than 5 minutes, but it's still definitely possible. Yeah, so just some really good blog posts that I suggest you look out for. We have, mastering Koii hackathons. We have the Encode hackathon that's coming up soon. We do have an ongoing hackathon. If you had signed up for it, you're eligible. Unfortunately, this hackathon that's ongoing is only eligible for those people who signed up. Encode will also be a sign-up only hackathon. It will also be in person. But we'll be going back to running the Koii Global Anyone Can Join in Hackathon very soon. So yeah, all that news can often be found here in the blog. Next up, we'll look at Ocean. This is our new Ocean layout. The Ocean page you might be familiar with, but we're slowly starting to update it bit by bit. We're going to be adding next week a login button here so that, well, first you have to click apply now. So if you want to be a part of the Koii Ocean, you want to have your stuff up on Koii, click apply now, go through this form right here, and then we'll set you up with one of these pages. Very soon, there'll be a login button up here, and you'll be able to click login, and you'll be able to kind of self-serve your way through this process. But for now, it's pretty manual. But if you want to see yourself up here, definitely apply, and we'd love to put your task up here, especially if you're working on Koii. Even if it's not necessarily whitelisted yet, this is a good way to share what you're doing. And you can also share your task ID and stuff like that so people can maybe find out more about your task that way. We're not going to dive too deeply into the docs, but the docs have a lot of good resources. For example, how to write a task. We get into some more details here. How to make your own tokens. This is just a step-by-step. How to get your first tokens if you haven't, don't have any tokens on Koii. Of course, you'll be able to. Right now you can purchase tokens on Koii on CVPad, or we'll be launching our own DEX very soon. And then, of course, there's an introduction to Koii. If you don't know what Koii is, I assume everybody does. But if you don't know what Koii is, maybe you're watching this on YouTube, check this out. It's an introduction. It's pretty good. Of course, if you're a more visual learner, we do have the comics. Most people don't know about this, and of course, we kind of hide them away, which we should do a better job at showing them to the community. But basically, these comics are a really, really good way to wrap your head around exactly what's going on in Koii. We haven't made a new comic in a while. I think our most recent one was this KPL token one. Last updated September 6th, so about a month ago. But it's still really good information, very topical, very high level. So I suggest you check those out. I'm actually going to just post them in a few spots too, just to give some love. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Back to the matter at hand. Yeah, so within the docs, there is one thing you probably want to know about which aside from getting started, of course, is the task template. Task template. Sometimes when you type in task template, you have to scroll down a bit. But this developers section, task template, 0 to hero with Koii tasks. This is what I want you to click. Then there's a task template hyperlink right here that it takes you to. Boom. This will take you to the task template. So now we're going to have the EZ Sandbox and the task template, and we're going to kind of work through both of these. Just before I continue, I see I have a question in chat. You wanted to check and make sure that you can schedule a quick meet sometime on Saturday, Sunday. I can check with you on Discord. So I do have over 200 messages on Discord right now. So if I haven't gotten back to anybody in a while, it's because I have so many. I'm going to try and spend about 2 hours today, just to get through them all. So if I haven't gotten back to your Discord messages in a while, I apologize. Nick, I'd say yes, you can send me a Discord message today if it's soon, just because I'll be looking at them. But I think, Nick, you also have my email, so I would suggest using that. If you don't have my email, Avinash@Koii.network. I definitely suggest just emailing me there. Oh, Ali, I've been missing some of your messages too, it seems. Yeah, I'm very sorry if I missed them. Please take that email too. And if you message my email, I guarantee I'll be much faster at getting back to you. Really, really sorry about that. People have been messaging me on Discord. Um, yeah, and of course also on Telegram. If you have me on Telegram, sometimes it's easier to reach me there too. Discord is a bit noisy, so just to let people know. Um, I'll try and follow up today with everyone and send an apologies as well, if I missed anything important. Uh, yeah, sorry about that. But let's continue. Uh, the task template. So we've done a lot of work to make our new task template like really, really, really nice for developing. So if you're a previous developer, or you're new to Koii, the task template is going to be really nice for you to work with. So just to get into a code editor, I'm going to press the period key. That period key is going to bring up the web editor. Just going to give this 1 sec. Let's sync. We're commits behind. I've done some editing here, of course. So sometimes I'm surprised that my code space stayed up, but I guess what happened was I had opened this before and we did some updates to the task template, so I just needed to pull those in. Awesome. But now we're here with a new task template. I'm gonna zoom in because it's a little hard to see. Zoom. Nice. I hope that's easier for people to see. Maybe let me go one more. Let me know if you want me to zoom in anymore. Okay. So as everybody knows, or as I hope you know, maybe you don't know, maybe this is your first time coming, so no worries. When you jump into your task template, the first place you should go is your config task.yml. It's usually the easiest place to start, at least in my experience. Here you can fill out your task name, the author of the task, a description, the repository URL. If you want your task to ever become whitelisted, which is sort of our security vetting process, you need to have your task be open source. Image URL and info URL, the image is the thumbnail, and the info is, in theory, this will eventually become Ocean pages, your Koii Ocean page, but for now, you can kind of put whatever you want in there. Some people put their own website, for example. It's up to you. Ignore this. This is just GitHub talking to me, I believe. Yeah. What's next? Oh, sorry. This is my head. This was GitHub. I'll just go through it again. So you have task name, author, uh, markdown description path. If you specify a markdown file, the description field will be ignored. Markdown is recommended for better formatting. So if you want to get fancy with your task description, this is definitely the best way to do it. And we knew a lot of people have been wanting to do this so that you can do really cool things with your task description. So all you need to do is add this file and set that up. And then, so it'll be in this repo, you make a task description.md and you populate it with all of the markdown you want. Of course, you can ignore this task description if you specify a markdown file. I suggest you use a markdown file, by the way. If you're making a task and you're like, oh, should I do a generic task description? Should I do a markdown file? I suggest you make the markdown file. And even if you want to just put some regular text in there without properly formatting the markdown, it'll give you a lot more. It'll make it a lot easier for you to edit your and customize your description in the future. Repository URL, like I said, you need to have a public repo, you need to have open source code. Of course, you can keep some trade secrets. We're not expecting you to reveal everything, but anything that you want to keep secret, we suggest you hide behind your own private API. I guess in the land of decentralized, unless it's a private API, it's basically public information. Image URL, this is how, like the pixels size width that we recommend. Of course, you can work with whatever you'd like. Info URL, task description. I'd probably just use IPFS for now. If you know what you're doing, you can change that to development, but don't worry about it too much. The task audit program. I would again probably keep this the same. This will be the path to your executable, right? I would probably not mess with that too much unless you know what you're doing. It's probably not something for beginners. Round time. So these, if you know how a Koii task works, it's going to do the work. Other nodes on the network are going to audit your work. And then one node on the network is going to be randomly selected to give out everybody's rewards. This is the timing of those cycles. Each slot is 408 milliseconds. So you can roughly approximate that about 2.5, I guess, round time points approximately, is 1 second. So that's sort of the rough calculation in your head. You can use an online calculator too, to sort of get these numbers. I'm pretty sure this is around 10 minutes. I could be wrong. Correct me if I am. Minimum stake amount. So the minimum stake is what you should be putting. You should be putting 0.1 if you're testing your task, first of all. And the reason is because when you're testing your task, you want to be paying the least amount of gas fees. So keep that really small. But in general, one of Koii's reputational mechanisms is called proof of stake. Proof of stake basically means that in order to be considered a good actor on the network, you put up some stake. You get to decide what that's going to be. Typically, I would put it at like 2 myself. I think that's more than enough. But if you want to put it higher, you're totally welcome to. We're just going to ignore this stuff that I think. Oh no, I have to go over this. Ignore the fact that it's happening twice. Let's just look at the blue because this is the incoming change from GitHub. I apologize for how messy this might look, especially if you're new. But basically, you're going to have a task type. The task type is whether or not you're using your own token, using the Koii programming library, or if you're going to use Koii itself. And really, there should be a $sign there. If you use Koii itself, you're going to need to have plenty of Koii to power your task. We'll have our decks on live soon. You can go to CVPad now if you actually want to purchase tokens. Of course, there will be a cliff and a vesting schedule. TGE will be December 1st. So you can kind of, make that assessment yourself. But I would recommend KPL tokens because you can mint as many KPL tokens as you'd like. Optional only if test type is KPO. Right, sorry. Let's look at the blue. I looked at the green. Looking at the blue, this is your mint address. So if we chose KPO, then we need to put in the minting address of our KPO token. If you follow the docs, we'll kind of go back just a sec. So if you go back to Koii.network, you go to the docs, you go to KPL. Oh wait, it's right here. Mint your own token on Koii. You just click that big button that's right in front of you. You can go to our KPL token creator, and then you can create mint tokens. It's pretty easy. You just got to fill in the forms, and then when you mint your tokens, it'll basically give you that minting address in the process. Just make sure to copy it down, store it somewhere secure. If you ever lose it, this is a public address, so it's not a big deal. If I guess you don't need to store it somewhere secure. It's a public address. But if you ever lose it, you can always go to our Explorer. That's explorer.koii.live. You can just type in the name of your token, and it should appear right here. You can copy the address right here. We'll zoom in a bit so that makes more sense. Basically, you search the token. I have one called K-Webinar. You can refresh it. You can copy this address. And that's what we're going to put right here, basically. And you can see that that's the old one I put in. Cool. Total bounty amount. Again, keep this 10 is the minimum, but keep this at 10 for testing. But when you're actually deploying your task, you'll know that one round is going to take this much time. I'm giving it this much bounty per round. So how much bounty do I need to run my task for as long as I want to run it for? So for example, you might want to put 10,000. You might want to give people out like 1 or something. Again, for testing, we're going to keep this as 10. Bounty amount, we're going to keep it 0.1. I have a question in chat. Round time includes the whole cycle, right? Submission plus audit plus distribution. There's a better way to think about it, and I can show you in the EZ Sandbox. Go to how does a Koii task work? So basically what's going to happen is we could look at this as this might not be this is what I was looking for. Okay, sorry. So basically what's going to happen is the steps are always being passed forward. So you could consider one round, see round time right there, is the entire round. It's going to do the job. This next bit is actually round 2. In round 2, we're going to be auditing the work. In round 3, we're going to be distributing the rewards. Now, there's a caveat to this. These aren't happening, or these are all happening synchronously. So what I kind of mean by that, maybe if I open Figma. Okay. I should have a better way of, stacking rounds. Here we go. This is exactly what I was looking for. Sorry about that. So let's look at round 1, 2, and 3. So in round 1, we're kind of doing the work here, then reviewing, then distributing. And so we see slot 0, slot 10, slot 20, 30, 40. In round 2, we started round 2 at slot 10. We're still going to review, and we're going to do the work. Now we're in slot 20, where we're going to start round 3 down here, but we're still going to distribute. This is going to be the distribution period for round 1, the review period for round 2, and the distribution or the work period, sorry, for round 3. And it'll always cascade like that. So basically, you have this formula right now, which is basically n plus 1 or n plus 2. Yeah. So this is kind of how it works. So if we come back to round time, That's why we kind of mentioned the submission window should be 1/3 of round time, just to ensure that, oops, sorry, we go back here, sorry. If we have 10 slots as our round time, 10 slots for our work period, then we want to make sure that the review period and the distribution period happen within that. And if they run into errors, they have this extra time. For example, to create the new Merkle head on the chain, or just the delay that happens to be in the audit phase. So that's why we want to adhere to these rules. Basically, this is doing the work, and we want to make sure that within the time we do the work, we can make sure that the audit or submission happens. These don't actually have to be the same time, by the way. Sometimes auditing is a lot longer than submission. Actually, it almost always is. So it's kind of up to you how you want to distribute that, but overall, it shouldn't matter too much resource-wise or anything like that. So you can kind of do whatever you want as long as it's following the rule of round time is round time, and then submission and audit are 1/3 of that round time. We have allowed failed distributions here. I would recommend basically not doing anything with that. 3 is a really good number. Uh, Sometimes things happen in your task where failure might not be considered the user's fault. Almost always you can build logic to handle that. But there are some cases where it's like it actually has to do with the timing of things. And sometimes, you want to have a more possible failed attempts before someone gets booted off the system. It's possible. Very, very few use cases actually require this. Space. This is the task data size in megabytes for the account size. Don't worry too much about what that means right now. You can read the docs to get a better understanding. But what matters most is that you want to keep this at 0.1 for testing. And you want to go anywhere from like 1 probably to 4, maybe 5 even for production. I think 3 is the golden number. 3 is golden number. The cost in gas to deploy a task is directly related to space. So if you're deploying your testing task, super duper important that you have your space set to 1. Otherwise, you're going to be paying 169 in gas fees, basically like guaranteed. It's going to be a lot, and you don't want that. So keep your gas fees really low, and you'll pay the least amount you have to. Also, I suggest that, and we'll get down to this, you're going to have a production task, and that'll have its own task ID. You should have a test task. That'll have its own test ID. We have a testing suite in Koii, so you don't have to continuously redeploy in order to test. You can actually just update your code, relaunch the task by just clicking that pause play button that you've seen in the desktop node many times, and you can get going again. Requirement tags are pretty self-explanatory for the most part, except for there's one to note. It's called the task variable. Okay, you can call this whatever you want. I tend to call it the test variable, and you can give it a description. Now, basically, before someone can run your task, they have to input this task variable. This could be a Twitter username, for example. It could be a Twitter password too. These task variables are always held locally. In order to be whitelisted, Koii ensures that you're not doing anything malicious with these task variables because sometimes they can contain passwords. If you're running a non-whitelisted task and you don't trust the person who made the task, be very, very wary of putting in task variables into their task. You should also be wary of basically running that task at all. They can do whatever they want if we haven't security vetted it. Tags. I don't know why this tag says witness, but you can put whatever tag you want in. For example, AI or maybe webinar. Tags are just, you know, they make it easier for us to search through stuff, especially in the Explorer, and eventually on the Koii Ocean page. Environment. I brought this up when we were talking about space, but basically you have your test or your production environment. Again, you want to make one test task and one production task. I recommend naming your testing task as test, test name. The reason I say that is because production mode exposes your tasks to all task runners, even if not whitelisted. Uh, but you will have versions of your test task. So in order to avoid you getting confused on your own version, you should name all your test environments. I've done this many times where I had way too many versions of a task in it, and I didn't even know what was going on. Luckily, you don't have to redeploy test tasks anymore. Um, but just in case you have been doing that or had done that, strongly suggest you add a name to all of them. Now, if using the Koii create task CLI to update tasks, you want to make sure you're putting in the old task ID because it's going to create a new task ID when it updates. And then you want to make a migration description just so that everybody knows kind of what. Uh, just one sec. I was curious. So, does anybody have any questions on the config task YML, or are we all good? Cool. It's clear so far. Awesome. So yeah, so we set up the config task YML. Um, if you want to know how to actually deploy your task, we have a bunch of links to this create task CLI. That's the command line tool. You'll need to use that to create your task, and it'll use this config task YML to do that. But you might be wondering, okay, but like, what does my actual code look like? Um, you see these, you have your source folder and your test folder. In your source folder, this is where the task actually lives. And in your test folder, this is where all your testing stuff lives. For example, the unit test simulate task, or prod debug, which is the actual testing suite, the debugger itself. Prod debug launches the debugger. The debugger itself is a testing debugger. Prod debug is a production debugger. We always suggest using the production debugger unless you know exactly what you're doing with the old debugger. Prod debugger is almost always better. Yeah, so you can add your unit tests to this folder, of course, and then just call them from within prod debug. Simulate, probably in the debugger. Simulate. Ah, we're not even calling the simulate task unit test. It's probably just there as an example. We're working on a simulate to task unit test as well. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the task itself. So if you don't know what all those tests and stuff are, don't worry too much about it. Just if you do know what it was, sometimes it's easier to go to that first. But now let's look at the task. In our new task template, we have basically laid out everything as simple as we can. The first thing you'll notice is that there's an index.js, and it's going to initialize the task manager in this order: setup, task, submission, audit, distribution. We'll get into those in just a sec. The other thing you might want to note is your routes. So if you have a route and you want to make your own one, um, this is where you would do it. So if the Express app, oh, sorry, that's not what I we say if Express app, right? This is this if statement here. If we have a get, maybe we want it to be a post, and we want to say, I don't know, blog entry, right? You could put whatever you wanted in here. Const value store get doesn't even have to be that. It could be, um, const value equals you are making a blog entry or whatever. Obviously, there's a post. It's a bad example, but you get the idea of you can just make your own express endpoints right here. Very easy. Now we open up the task, and we're going to go in the order of setup to distribution. So we start with setup, and we just look through. Define any steps that need to be executed before the task starts. That's what setup is for. You can also define custom API routes within the routes folder. They'll automatically be collected from the routes folder. You can call them, you can call them manually here, but don't worry too much about it if you don't know exactly why you'd want a custom thing here. You can always go to routes.js. Other than that, yeah, maybe you want to console.log some things. Maybe you have Puppeteer set up. Maybe you want to configure the Express app before we call it. If you want to configure the Express app, you need to do that in setup. So if you want to use all our default setups, which you totally can, then just jump right into task. This is where the Koii task quote does the work. This is the real heart of any Koii task. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming. So what I'm gonna do is just delete all of this. It's within this try statement that all of your logic is gonna happen. So what's happening is this is just a function called task. It has a try statement in it, which it's gonna try. If it fails that, it's gonna report an error to the console, which is the log. So, you can go to your logs and see whatever it reports. Now I'm going to bring back this hello world example. These are two console.log statements. You don't need to see those. I just want to highlight this. This is all this task is doing. It's calling our namespace wrapper, which is the package. It's the npm package that basically contains all of the Koii related functions. And then we're basically using the store, which is our database, and we're setting. Of course, there's also store get. I have a question in chat, and I will get to that in just a sec. So if we'd have to, we just have to make this a const hello world equals. So in store set here, we're creating a key called a value, and we're making the value hello world. Maybe we should call this key to make more sense. We're making a key, and we're calling it key, and then we're putting data in that key. So in this case, hello world doesn't have to be a hello world though. For example, it could be an object. You could have const hw string equals hello world, and then right here we could put in the hello world string. You can put whatever you want, and of course, store get, we actually just need the key, or which is key in this case. Cool. So all we need to really say, and I guess I didn't necessarily need to get this here, so I'm just going to comment that out. Let's say we stored into the tasks database the string hello world. Just before I move on to what we're going to do with that string, I'll answer a question. If a few nodes run my task with an Express app, for example, how would I know which one to communicate with? Or how does that work? I remember something about an IP list. You can just take a random one and call it. What the distribution list is doing. So when we've done the work, we've audited the work, and we want to give rewards out, that is basically you can summon a list of all the IPs that are connected to the current task, and you can take a random one and you can say, hey, you're the node that's going to give out rewards this time around. And that's how we do it by default at Koii. Of course, you can do whatever you like. But basically you're saying, if a few nodes are running my task, how do they know which one to communicate with? Which is a great question. We're going to go back to the EZ Sandbox right quick here. And I'm just going to quickly go over the lesson that explains it. So we're going to go to EZ Sandbox lesson 1 part 4, where you deploy your task. And let's see if we can find the endpoint in here that you're supposed to go to. Is it in here? Should be slash task. Ah, it's not in here. I could explain this. I just want to make sure that I'm finding the right spot in our tutorial so that um, you're actually, you can find this information yourself. Lesson 2. Hmm. Just real quickly, humor me here. Let's just go through the EZ Sandbox to see if we can find where it actually mentions the specific URL. Basically, what I'm doing here, though, is there is a URL. To explain, every task has its own Express app, and it has its own unique URL to get to it. I'm going to do my best. Ah, okay. Sorry about that. It's in EZ Sandbox, Lesson 1, Part 2, Introduction to Koii Tasks. You scroll all the way to the bottom, accessing your node. Now, you can enable UPnP, and that's explained earlier in this tutorial, but you don't actually need to enable UPnP to expose Express app endpoints. It says by using it, but that's actually not true. These endpoints are always available. UPnP is a separate protocol on top of it. Basically, though, you can use HTTP, and I'll zoom in. You can use HTTP ://localhost 30017 / then the task ID, then your endpoint. And that's how you can run or find the local endpoint on any given node. So if you're on this computer or that computer, that's always where the local endpoint is. That being said, if you're not in testing, if you're in production and you have a whitelisted task, you can replace this here with your own, or rather, this will be replaced with an official Koii URL. Then that'll get to the task, then that'll get to the task ID, then that'll get to the endpoint. When we get to this task endpoint right here, and we actually add in the task ID, the system intelligently knows, I need to start coordinating all the different tasks within it, or all the different nodes within it. And then it'll know which endpoint to use, usually pretty intelligently, based off, how you hit that endpoint. But I see that you have a follow-up question. So like if I did HTTP random IP of the nodes that are running the task /task/ID/endpoint. In concept, yes. If UPnP is enabled, so this is where UPnP comes in. If you want to actually hit the IP of the node as a domain, you need UPnP involved, universal plug and play. If you don't, you need to create your own HTTP server. Express handles all of this. And then you need to plug in your own domain here. And then you can access your version of the Koii node. If you're using your own domain, then you do need to have an extra endpoint to coordinate different tasks if you want that. So it's a little complicated, a little convoluted what I just said. We're working on a unit test to make this a little easier, but basically any endpoint running on your nodes, if you want to hit a local endpoint, you do it like that. If you want to hit a specific other node or another node, if you wanted to do it just using our own optimizations, which is functionally random for you, then you can just use something like this, where this will eventually be your production domain. But if you want to actually specify, there's a specific node on the network that has, let's say they have a specific GPU, right? I want to hit their 4070 RTX GPU. Then you would need a specific endpoint to handle that logic of saying, okay, does this node have a GPU? Yes or no? If it doesn't, then we want to reject it. And we want to keep on rejecting until the task hits an IP with the appropriate endpoint. And how is the task finding those IPs? It's not going through them randomly. It's going from them top to bottom. Top is the first IP that joined the network. Bottom is the most recent IP that joined the network. I know that's not necessarily super beginner friendly what I said. So I'm just going to pause here and ask if there's any questions. Maybe also if I knew your use case of why you wanted to hit another Express app, that might help me simplify the answer because I'm trying to make it really generic and broad. But the easiest way to answer this is basically the node automatically tries to communicate with other nodes on the network, and it basically tries to see if they're busy, and it also tries to intelligently communicate based off what the endpoint is actually doing. And that's all configured, I believe, at the Webpack level. So if we actually go back to our code space and we go back to our Webpack config.js, uh, yeah, target node when using, yeah. So I'm not going to get into this because this gets complicated real fast, but it's not too much for you to just basically kind of Google through your way through all this, put it into ChatGPT maybe and ask. I really want to avoid getting into Webpack config uh, for this webinar. Um, you were saying so. Well, I get the idea. I was just thinking about like, would I be able to work like a distributed backend server? Yes, yes, it does. It can, especially if you're using IPFS. So like for example, Pentagon Games is one of our most recent partners. They're currently working on their task. What they want to do is they want every node in the network to hold, you know, to be able to hold a lot of their large files, so that they can essentially stream a video game directly to your browser. And that is it. That almost works exactly. I mean, distributed backend server is a little broad, but it is a distributed backend server where essentially all these nodes are this decentralized distributed server. They all have shards of the information that's needed. We have a tool called IPFS, Interplanetary File System. It's a decentralized file system. What it does is it collects all that information intelligently. It rebuilds the packages based off the IDs, the content IDs, and then one node basically will grab all that data and then serve directly to the client. So it's definitely possible. It's definitely an advanced topic when it comes to Koii. We're working on making that as easy as possible. Over time, we hope that it's like super simple to unit test this stuff and to select nodes and to access them. But for now, it's a pretty advanced topic to look into all that kind of stuff. If you ever want help, I do suggest going into Discord and opening up a support forum thread in the support forum. Not only can other people in the Discord, they can help you out there. Also, every now and then I try and check that one out. Especially starting October 24th. We're going to be doing a bunch of hackathons and stuff like that. So hopefully that space will become a lot more lively and I'll be in there much more frequently. Cool. We're running a little close to the end of our time, so I just want to come back. Hopefully we didn't forget that we stored hello world and we set it as the and we called it key, and it's our hello world string. So for submission, we want to store get key. That's it. Now in audit, it's going to say, is that submission hello world? If it is, this is going to return true or false. Is submission exactly equal? That's what the three equals means, is exactly equal to hello world. If you do two equals, it'll basically try and approximate, but if it won't be too fussy about data type and all that stuff. So use the three equals, and then boom, it's going to automatically distribute. Distribution is probably the most complicated step. Not too bad if you want to read through it. It's only 40 lines, but at the same time, uh, you can use the default and it'll just work. This is going to vote back true or false. If you wanted something more complex, you could do let vote equal false. Then you could do a if submission equals hello world. Then vote equals true. And then you want to return vote. So you can totally do that too. Which means, you can do whatever you want within this if statement, and then you can just return a true or false. If you return a false, it's going to be considered a 0. If you return a true, it's going to be considered a 1. This distribution mechanism also handles floats and stuff like that. Like a vote could be a 0, it could be a 1, it could also be a 0.5. So if you want to customize exactly how submission is looking at that kind of stuff, you can come in here. It's really, really easy and tractable once you read through it a few times, but it's a little much if you just throw it at someone. So I try to leave it for the end just because the default is always good enough. Another example, just before we run away, I just wanted to touch on an example that I'm building on with, I'm making a tic-tac-toe game. And as you can imagine, in tic-tac-toe, player one and player two want to connect into a lobby, and they want that lobby to be the same lobby. So what I ended up doing was I basically made an endpoint that is the lobby ID. So what my task does is it tries to connect to this endpoint, and then it goes into the task. Then it goes right immediately into the task ID. And then how my endpoint handles it is it basically just says lobby ID is the lobby ID. So if you try and get, this would actually be a get for me, and you went to that endpoint lobby ID, what I want to do is I want to return to you response code 200 is okay, and let's say the value is game.js or whatever, or .html or whatever. You're just going to serve them the whole file, and maybe it's in the form of a content ID. So you want to, if it's in the form of a content ID and you're doing the IPFS stuff, just go to our docs and go to upload or download, or retrieve. It's actually retrieve, sorry. Upload or retrieve. You can use these two functions within your task to collect and return CIDs. And it works pretty easy. Just got to read through this. It's very easy to copy, paste, and implement. And then you could potentially, collect an HTML file and all that kind of stuff. Basically, anything you want the task to download before it sends to someone, you want to put to IPFS first, and then you want to have the task fetch that file. If you webpack by default, the executable won't contain this game.html file, for example. Obviously, it'll be webpacked within there, but accessing it will be a lot different. So easy solution is lobby ID is just a lobby ID. And when you hit this, in theory, my game creates a unique lobby ID endpoint anytime new people join in. And then you're always just going to that lobby endpoint. And when you hit that, it's just going to return something by default. That's probably the easiest way to implement sort of hitting a specific node. There are more complicated ways like I described before, but this is definitely way, way easier now that I'm thinking about it. Is there an easy way to send Koii and other tokens on the task submission and then verify the transaction during the audit? It's possible. I don't know if there's necessarily an easy way, but if you're saying in submission, I want to send tokens from the task bounty pool or the tasks pool into the user's wallet. Is that what you're saying? And then verify the transaction during the audit? Yes, you can totally do that with the namespace wrapper. Um, but I don't know if I necessarily recommend doing it. Um, in theory, what we want to do is we don't want to do any transactions until the distribution step. In theory, we want to do some work. We want to audit that work was correct, and then we want to go to the distribution step, and that's where we want to use the distribution logic to generate a smart contract um, to facilitate the transaction, and then that'll append to the chain um, with all of the relevant information. From nodes to some smart contract or address. Yeah, again, I'd recommend just putting that all into distribution because we automatically handle the smart contracts and stuff like that on the K2 blockchain. But if you want to look into our blockchain docs, which I will admit are a lot scarier, yeah, you could totally basically, what you're gonna need is, uh, there's a function in here that you're gonna need. Should come from the namespace. Oh, sorry. Something to note. In our task template at the top here, we added the new /% variable. Um, so if you just want to edit the amount that someone gets slashed if they fail the audit run, just put it up here. So that's super easy to edit now. But specifically to answer your question, let's see. Yeah, it's within the distribution list. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at the submitter within that distribution list. And you can do this in submission too. As long as you generate the list beforehand. Just call it whatever you want. Pre-distribution list or transaction list. Get the submitter and get their public key. You can also get the submitter's public key by using namespace wrapper dot main pub key. It's just namespace wrapper main public key. It's something like that. If you just if you just control space, it'll all come out. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Should be an M. Oh, it might be a get. No, it's an M. Anyway, it's somewhere in here. The main key. You can also, of course, go into our docs and find it there. Um, let me see if I have it conveniently. Actually, I think I do. I think I actually do have it very conveniently right here. Oh yeah, it's get main account pub key. Namespace wrapper dot get main. It's just not going to show up here in code space, but it's get main account pub key. So you could get their public key like that. Don't check if it's 0 because there's obviously been no vote that's been made. So yeah, you could do namespace wrapper dot get main pub key to get their public key. We're not going to slash them. Yeah, in the new, okay, so in this new task template, we did a lot of work to basically hide away all the blockchain stuff. So it's uh it's kind of hard to see. I mean, you basically can't see it anymore, which was our goal, but it's hard to see what's going on in the back end and like how all those contracts are being written up. I suggest you go to our docs. We have K2 docs, and you can actually dive a bit more deeply into how to generate a smart contract, um, proper procedures, how you can put that. Uh, I think there's a section on how you can put that into Signal. Would that be sending to a user node? Is there a possibility to send from it, like a charity donation script subscribing thing? That's not really. I mean, again, it's technically possible. Um, if you know, it would be a huge security vulnerability if you did it through a Koii task, in my opinion. I think that a much better approach, like if you want to have donations, charity donations, would be to set up um, a web portal. I mean, in practice, you could probably host that web portal through Koii, like if you wanted to do Koii as the hosting solution, but you'd really want to create your own web. Like I wouldn't put that within the actual logic of the distribution or the audit or something. I'd probably have it within tasks. I'd have an API or whatever, and that API would basically do and write all the smart contract stuff. And then basically at the end, it would just pass some metadata into the submission audit that you could vote on. Like basically, if I hit an API, did that API return transaction complete? Great, then we'll audit. I wouldn't put that into, I wouldn't overload the submission audit or distribution methods to do something like that. Definitely very easy to do though in task, which is basically say run this task. This task will launch a web, like you can use Puppeteer. It'll launch a Google Chrome browser, and then all you have to do is like click a few buttons and put in your Koii main wallet, and then you can send funds that way. Um, my big concern is I don't want to enable task creators to access user wallets. Um, because if you did that, I feel like that would open up a lot of vulnerabilities. I'd much rather you have a web portal that's more clear and users have to manually upload their own wallet or connect their Finny wallet or something like that. Yeah, if you wanted to do daily automatic ones, what I'll say is you could definitely make it. You can make that task and you could have a scheduler and you could basically say, hey there, I need to like this task is going to request access to your main wallet and it's going to have it permanently. I don't think we could whitelist that. Like that would never pass our security auditing. But you can make the task and you can share the ID around to people you know and who trust you. And if they trust you, then they probably wouldn't have much of a problem running it. Um, you could do that. Yeah, I think the security concern is a bit too large. I think I'd much rather, you have someone connect to Finny um, to do transactions and stuff like that. And I'd rather users are in control of those transactions. Again, if it's a payment system, that's probably then you should make the payment system within the task. Um, and then you should have a web portal and stuff. Yeah, I guess it's just not the best use case for Koii. Yeah, for sure, no worries. Tasks are powerful and they can basically do whatever they want within the permissions that the user is given the desktop node. So you'd have, I don't suggest this, but let's say you ran your desktop node as an administrator. I mean, someone could delete your system 62 or 32 with that, and then just brick your PC basically. So we try to avoid all that kind of stuff. Yep, for sure. Do not run the Koii node as an administrator. That would be giving a lot of power to the tasks that you run. That being said, all whitelisted tasks are security vetted by Koii. If it's a whitelisted task, meaning if it shows up as of right now, then it is secure, at least as far as we're concerned. Um, and we're willing to put our reputation on the line. But very soon, you're going to be able to enable non-whitelisted tasks, and you're going to have to be supremely careful with those. And we're going to have tons of warnings just so that you're very, very certain. Hey, you're running a task that hasn't been whitelisted, um, and it might be dangerous. We're doing this simply because we have too many tasks that want to get whitelisted now, and it takes us about a week to whitelist a task, and it takes one of my best engineers basically the whole week. It's a lot of back and forth, GitHub issues and stuff like that. We're working on automations, but those automations also take up a lot of our time. And because TGE is coming out in about a month and a half, time is a, very valuable commodity. So essentially as a band-aid solution, we're going to enable seeing and adding and playing non-whitelisted tasks, but there'll just be tons and tons of warnings that will associate with that. All right. Well, I will definitely stick around in case there's any extra questions. To those of you who messaged me on Discord and haven't received anything back from me in probably 2 weeks now, send me an email. Is my recommendation, but also I'll be looking through all of my Discord messages today. I'll try and schedule some time, maybe 2 hours to just go through all those. I'm not sure I'll be able to get through all of them, depending on like the complexity, but I'll try and put some priority on people like you, um, and Nick. Um, so yeah, cool. Hope all that makes sense. Let me know if you have any more questions. Drop me a line. And of course, if you're a hackathon participant and you're waiting for hackathon results, those results will be out on October 13th. All right. I'm going to mute my mic. I'm going to stick around. Yeah, thanks for coming. Um, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them. Otherwise, have a great day, guys.